we go. Look for the green button. It's been so long since I've been in this room, so I'd like to welcome members of the committee out. This is actually the first time in probably a couple years that I remember since we've actually had a meeting in this room. It's great to be back, and we welcome some people online as well. What we're going to do is start with, oh, we have Andrew with us.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
Yeah, it's
Nice
good to be
see
back.
you.
Thanks for the invite. Again, I'm Commissioner Gage for Weber County. I chair the committee, the district. What we're going to do is we're going to start with some introductions. And if you wouldn't mind, besides your name, just tell us who you represent. It's been such a long time, and with our past Zoom meeting, it's been a little difficult to relate a name with who they actually correspond with in the workforce or the government agency. So I'm going to start down here to my far left. If you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you represent.
My name is Tara Anderson. I'm with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, and I work with Laura with planning.
I'm Alex Tranmer with Camoin Associates. We're part of the consulting team that is working on the Unified Economic Development Plan, and we'll be talking later in the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Laura Hanson, GOPB.
Good afternoon. Dan Gunderson, and I'm with Camoin Associates, and I'll be speaking with you in a few minutes. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Sarah Tolliver with Visit Ogden.
Hi all, Nick Fritz from Intermountain Healthcare.
I'm Susie Becker with Zion's Public Finance.
I am not Muriel, because I work for her. I'm Chloe Maroney in X Factor Communications.
I'm Holland Wilbanks with Big D Construction.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Gruber. I'm the Executive Director here at Wasatch Front Regional Council, and welcome. Nice to have you all here in person and online. Thanks for joining us.
Marcia.
Marcia White. I'm the Economic Development Director at Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Megan Townsend, Community and Economic Development, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
I'm Shannon Ellsworth. I represent Rio Tinto.
Edward Bennett with the Swazo Business Center.
Good afternoon. Ted Knowlton, Deputy Director, WFRC.
Hello, everyone. Rick Bullion, Workforce and Economic Development, Salt Lake Community College.
Rosie Hernandez, Administrative Assistant with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Thank you. Before we go to the online and our guest, we'll have the commissioner, good commissioner from Morgan County, just take a second. Introduce yourself.
Commissioner, use the mic, please, so the people online can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, pull that close.
Blaine Thacker from Morgan County, County Commissioner.
Great. And let's go to our guest in the back here.
Mike Sopchuk, Communications Manager from WFRC.
And I'm Ned Hacker with the Wasatch Front Regional Council.
I think we hit everybody in the room. That's great. So I'm going to go to Rosie now, and she's going to go through the online Zoom participants. Again, for those that are on the Zoom, if you take a second, just introduce yourself and who you represent. Rosie, go ahead. And then she'll also be taking roll at that time.
Let's just go down the list. And the first one is Michaela Jordan.
Hi, everyone. Michaela Jordan with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Chris Sloan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chris Sloan, representing Tooele County.
Shailene Gee.
Hi, everyone. Shalene Gee with Science Bank.
Carrie Fullerton.
Hello, Carrie Fullerton, Bank of Utah.
Anisa Brown.
Hi, Anissa Brown, Executive Director of Callis Campus in downtown Ogden.
Neil Berube.
Mayor of North Ogden City.
And there's mayor, but it doesn't say, it just says mayor.
Steve Gale, Mayor of Morgan City.
Darren Brush.
Darren Brush, Davis Technical College.
Randy Elliott.
Randy Elliott, Davis County Commissioner.
Lance Soff.
Lance Sof, I'm with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity.
Michael Parker.
Hello, Michael Parker with Ivory Homes.
Mayor Debbie Nguyen.
Yes, Mayor Debbie Wynn of Tooele City, and I'm sorry I can't be there with you today.
Daniel Royal.
Hello, Daniel Royal with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity.
That's all I see. If there's anyone I missed, if you could unmute yourself and state your name and where you're from. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Believe we do also have a official quorum. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Before we go into the action items on the minutes, I'm going to turn a second over to Marcia White for some housekeeping items.
We're a little rusty on this, but for those that are in-house, we have a couple of things to tell you. First of all, the restrooms are just right outside the door and to your right as you turn. And also, if you parked in our parking garage, there would be validations at the end of the meeting. So I just didn't want, we're kind of rusty at this in-house kind of stuff.
It's not quite as
in
easy, is
person.
it?
Yeah, right. I like the Zoom thing.
Yeah. Good. Is that it, Marcia? Thank you very much. Again, thanks for those that take the time out of their day to be with us live. It's great to have both the live and also the Zoom option for those that can't make the trip over here. But I personally like the live meetings. I think it's a little better for interaction, and it's obviously good to see some friendly faces. So good to hear. So with that, this is the official meeting for May 24th, 2022 of the Wasatch Front Economic Development District Committee. We do need one action item, which should approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was held March 16th on 2022. So I'd look for a motion to approve those minutes. Have a motion from Commissioner Fackrell. We have a second. Looks like we got a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Chair's going to rule that the motion carried. The minutes are approved for that date. Let's go now to public comment. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the committee at this point in time? Please come forward. And doesn't look like we have a huge audience. So we're probably not going to take 3 minutes each. Seeing none, we're going to move on to our discussion. Oh, yeah, sorry about it. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Drake. I'm the Director of Real Estate and Transit-Oriented Development at Utah Transit Authority. I think I know a lot of you. Looking forward to getting to know more of you. I've been there since 2008, working on transit-oriented developments throughout the Wasatch Front. So thanks for the time.
Welcome. Sorry, Mitch. Did we miss anybody else? Sometimes I get looking at the Zoom meeting and lose track if somebody walks in. All right. We're going to declare that we do have a quorum and we have approved the minutes. So let's move on to our discussion items that we're going to call public access, asset, and help. Some of you may be aware, both the WFRC and the Utah League of Cities and Towns have been funded by a very generous grant from the Intermountain Healthcare Association and Zions Bank to support services for our cities in this state to advance public and asset planning and management both. The program is called Your Land, Your Plan. And we have with us today Mr. Ted Knowlton that's going to go through and describe, and I think he's left a flyer in front of your microphone for you to take home and pass on any information. Ted, the time's yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's great to be with you all. I love this new concept of meeting in person. It's unusual, but I'm getting used to it. Now, this is a very intriguing initiative. I'm going to make just a very short introduction and then turn to Nicholas Fritz with Intermountain Healthcare to provide a little bit more context on this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drill down into what is the WFRC role in this initiative and get any input and feedback that you have today. Short item. Two major objectives of this initiative. Can we do more with our public assets, assets owned by government, land and buildings? Can we do more with them? Can we get more out of them? One. Two, can we help our communities be healthier with the way that we create the built and natural environment? How does that set us up for healthier lives? Those are the two big objectives. Nicholas will put a broader perspective on what this initiative is about. Nicholas?
Thank you so much. Hi, all. Please feel free to call me Nick. Let me just put
Sorry,
that
Nick.
in the record.
Okay, Mr. Fritz.
Thanks, Ted. That's a perfect kind of intro to the work. Intermountain and Zions Bank both, in partnership in the last couple of years, have been thinking about this kind of enormous pool of real estate assets, right, that exists in Utah, and just thinking about what the potential is, for those assets to be used in ways that are aligned with WFRC's sort of vision. For us in particular, we're thinking about what is the role of a private anchor institution in this work, right? I think Intermountain and Zions both think of ourselves as kind of forever organizations in the community. And really the health and well-being of our organizations depends on the health and well-being of the communities we serve. So we've done a little bit of research and tried to think about our role in the last couple of years. And really, the opening salvo of this work for us is this partnership with WFRC and the league that the chair spoke about. So, we're excited to be going on this journey with you all. It's a little bit ambiguous at the moment, but that's kind of the overall concept and what the background is. And Shalene, I know you're on the phone. I don't know if you have anything to add, or if not, Ted, I think I'd turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I just would say we're also really grateful for the work that WFRC and all your partners are already doing. So it's a new initiative, but a huge part of that initiative is to support the work that you're already doing now and what you're doing in the future, because we see it as very much aligned already. So thank you.
Thanks, Nick and Shalene. I am prone to more formality, but we know each other well, Nick. Okay, and it's important to remember that the League of Cities and Towns is a big partner in this. So it is a statewide initiative. Now, just think about these. These are a little unusual spaces to get into generally, and I think especially for Wasatch Front Regional Council. The first, how do we better utilize public assets, not public assets, pardon the miss there. But you can think of the totality of this land if you think about utilities and school districts and municipalities, DOTs, Department of Transportation. There is actually quite a bit of land out there. Some of it is being used for the core purpose, and other pieces are much less so. And there's questions about what we can do with them. Again, that's one of the goals. I'm a school district. My land and buildings are used for education, or they're vacant, but what could they be used for? For example, recreation, housing. Could they be bringing in a revenue stream? Economic opportunity, gardens, civic uses, maybe instead of, or maybe in addition to the core purpose of education. In this one example of the school districts. Now, slight drilling down on this, you can think about this entails having that public entity want to do something different. It might entail local government zoning, right? That's the one goal. The second goal, again, enable better public health by improving the built and natural environment. Reflect on this. Reflect on how the built environment sets the stage for how we live our life, which in turn affects how healthy we are, how much activity we get. Are we walking to transit? Are we mainly in our cars? Are there destinations near homes that encourage people to walk? What's the quality of our sidewalks and bike infrastructure? Those kinds of things affect life, health. Gardens, how many gardens are near us? All those kinds of things have a big impact. There's a lot of statistics out there. I'll focus on just one. Walkable communities, people who live in a walkable neighborhood are twice as likely to get physical activity as those who do not. There's a lot of statistics out there, but that's that second goal. Now, this is not a brand new space for Wasatch Front Regional Council. I think there's familiarity with the Wasatch Choice Regional Vision. This is that grassroots-driven vision of that sets a framework for how we coordinate together transportation planning, land planning, economic development, And how can we coordinate those things to improve our broad quality of life? One of the 10 goals for Wasatch Choice is livable and healthy communities. This is in fact goal 1 of the Wasatch Choice regional vision. We can and want to do more at WFRC on this goal. And this generous gift from IHC really helps get us jump started. So it's a 2-year initiative, but it doesn't end after 2 years. And it didn't begin this year either. But the generous gift from IHC really helps us just get wind in our sails. I'm bringing in all my metaphors here today. So if you think about, well, what is WFRC's role? And this is a question to see if there is input from the EDD on this slide, the second to last slide. Regionally, how can we help improve understanding of these 2 big opportunities? Again, public asset utilization and how communities affect health. Inventories, helping people understand where the land is, the public land that can be possibly utilized differently. Inventory, best practices for improving public health. Do we all know what are the levers that we can use to help set that stage for better public health? Locally, you know the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program. This is a partnership with Utah Department of Transportation, UTA, WFRC, Salt Lake County, where we work with local governments to help them achieve things that are also good for the region. We're going to use the TLC program to advance these 2 big goals through local work. These could be things like general plan elements that address health in the built environment, collaborative planning, let's say a school district working with a local government. What pieces of land do we want to explore? Towards what end? What are the benefits? What are the regulatory tweaks that we need to make that enable it to happen? What's the master plan? Things of that sort. Bike ped transportation plans could be regional open space plans. This is kind of the space we're at. Now you kind of see this builds off of 2 core competencies from WFRC, analytics and working with local governments. I'm just going to pause on this and see if you have questions about the initiative, suggestions, anything of that sort. And I'll just open it up and certainly invite, again, Nick and Shalene, Meg, Michaela, who's working on this, if you want to add anything that I didn't throw in the mix.
Great, thanks. Nick, do you have any additional comments or?
If you don't mind, yeah,
Go ahead.
Shalene mentioned this, and so did Ted. I think it bears repeating a 3rd time. You know, this is, I think, less Intermountain and Zions Bank kind of, trying to be directive about what kind of ends up, being developed on public land. This is more us just seeing ourselves in existing priorities that WFRC is advancing, and so is the league. And really, what we hope to offer is this lens of health, the social determinants of health, to view all these issues through.
And I would just add too, we think of this very much, again, the same way that WFRC always has been. And so we're already aligned. Healthy communities, we think about that at the individual level, a lot of the things that you see here, but also a healthy economy. So that livable and healthy community is a huge priority for all of us. And almost all of the other initiatives that you have and goals that you have under the Wasatch Choice vision also fall into our definition of a healthy community.
Can you help me understand how these opportunities get facilitated? Do you go to the local governments in the school districts and ask them to identify the opportunity? Do you present an opportunity? How does that part happen?
That's a terrific question. And there's not a particular formula. It is both being proactive in sharing this opportunity, chatting with potential communities and other community partners like school districts. Ultimately, it's those that want to come forward and take advantage of the opportunity. So if a local government thinks, yeah, we want to be a part of this to accomplish A, B, C, or D, then that's really the way that it comes forward. So great question.
One of the things I'd say there too is that we are working together with the league to create a flow for that's more formalized, so that it's not left to chance or just the proactive nature of a particular government or a school, but that there's a training program offered through the league, that there's things that you can enroll in as a community or your partners can enroll in. And we'll be rolling that out with the league through the fall of this year, so that everyone is aware of the opportunities, everyone can find a way, and there's a more kind of formulaic method for getting this kind of expertise and help.
Yeah, great viewpoint. Additional questions?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add quickly, Ted is going to talk about this a little bit, but we've talked about the work we're already doing, and I know that some of you are new to this committee and maybe interacting with some of the work of the Wasatch Front Regional Council and our partners in general. And so you can always dive deeper in the stuff at some of those links on that pamphlet too, just to get to know better the work that we're already doing that aligns with this.
Good to hear. Additional questions or comments? Andrew, do you have a comment as far as WFRC involvement, how you see this rolling out?
Really nothing that other than agreeing with what's been said here already. I did just want one logistical thing for the folks online. We're keeping an eye on you. Feel free to speak up, or if you have any questions, raise your hand. One of the challenges with hybrid meetings is people being online, feeling like they're a little out of the meeting. So don't be shy as we go forward here. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And Rosie, if anybody raises their hand, if you'll let me know so we make sure we can recognize them online. I did have one question, Ted. So it sounds like this is the inventory process that you mentioned. Will you be using the league for that, the cities across the state for that inventory process? Because it appears that's to be fairly critical to the success of this.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you're getting at how we do it or how we communicate it, but I guess
actually both. That was what I mean. My second question: how do you go about discussing this, marketing it, I guess, to the cities, and then coming up with the inventory? I'm assuming that you're going to rely upon the individual cities to give you their inventory of assets.
Yeah, we'll be working with cities, counties. We'll be working with assessors to get information to build that inventory. There is some question about how we share it because some of this can be a little bit sensitive.
Right.
We will definitely share it with all of the affected governments so that they're aware of it. And we've just got to work through how broadly available it is. Hopefully that makes some sense. Some government entities are a little bit more, don't want it necessarily broadcast what their land is, although ultimately it's all public record.
Yeah, good point. Shannon, do you have a question?
I did have a question. I was just curious what the formal or informal role of the league was. Are they a stakeholder, a partner? Are they executing? What is their role generally?
We are working that out with the league, but they're seeking to fill the role that we've talked about, but statewide. Now we'll collaborate on what happens with an inventory outside of the Wasatch Front and MAG combined area. They're going to take more of a leadership role on training and improving capacity within local governments to be able to do this kind of work. So they're more on point for that training side. And then that's kind of the difference in roles a little bit. We're more analytics, they're more training. We're both trying to work through the technical improvement.
Shannon, I imagine, is asking that question in part because she's also a member of the Provo City Council and on the league board. Aren't you on the league board? Okay, nonetheless, a very involved member of the league, along with Marcia, who is a member of the Ogden City Council. So multiple hats. Thanks.
And Shannon, it
Yes,
helps
go ahead.
me just make a clarifying point, which is that WFRC is working with Mountain Land. And so the WFRC kind of piece of this, you can kind of think of it as inclusive of Utah County.
Good. Commissioner Fackrell, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question on this. Is in this DLC,
Commissioner, can you pull that mic a little closer? There you go.
How close do you want it?
Right, just so we can, I don't hear very well, so the closer you can get.
All right. My question is on this TLC, the grant or whatever you're doing, is this for active transportation and other items, or is it just transportation and land use? I mean, tell me, I don't quite get it.
All of the above. How land is used, the infrastructure available for different forms of transportation, parks and open space planning. That's my caveman way of thinking about this. When we're talking about the built environment's impact on health, those three major spaces. Again, I'll say it again, how land is used, homes, buildings, design, 1, 2, parks and open space, planning and location, 3, the form and function quality of transportation infrastructure. That's not just sidewalks and bike paths, but also the roadways themselves, public transportation. So.
That answer your question, Commissioner? Additional questions or comments? Go ahead, Paul.
Ted, this might be an opportunity for a soundbite, but you mentioned that a lot of public entities, they're not broadcasting that they have extra land or any of those assets, right? What's in it for them to be involved in this program?
They're gonna, for starters, they're gonna understand what the opportunities are for them. They're gonna just better understand kind of what the possibilities are, 1. 2, they can actively explore those possibilities in a way where they're aligning what needs to be aligned to get it done. Like could be planning, could be zoning, could be, you know, a concept for how land is used in the future, something like that. And then, you know, there's also the quality of life benefits to the residents in the community. Ultimately, that's kind of what would be in it for them. It can be as simple as you have more revenue as a community or as a government as well.
I may just add, you know, I think part of the intent of the work overall is to just meet communities where they are and align this to their existing goals, right? So if a community maybe doesn't have a really great functional inventory of all of their real assets in one place, this might support that either through training or through, you know, grant funding. And maybe that comes through WFRC, maybe it comes through the league. We're still figuring out some of the technical aspects. And for communities who are a little bit further along, who might want to think about, you know, what ought we consider in terms of development that, you know, aligns with best practice, et cetera. I think there's some training and opportunities there as well. So the hope is that, you know, this work broadly meets communities where they are and just supports their goals, and at least to the degree that they're kind of aligned with these overall guiding principles.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just so you know what this slide, this is just an example of a project that we are currently in the early stages of working on that illustrates this. This is the Southwest Salt Lake County Waterways vision to address how to better utilize these potential and existing community assets with an eye towards helping people live healthier lives and have more amenities in their communities. Thank you,
Great.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good presentation. Rosie, do we have anybody online that has a comment or question before we move on? Great. Thank you. Again, thanks for the presentation, Nick, Ted. Looking forward to what the results may be from this program. So with that, let's move on to our next agenda item. If there's no other questions or comments, we're going to talk about the statewide discussion of comprehensive economic development strategy. We've talked about this in previous meetings. We want to kind of bring this to a head if we can, make sure that for those online and with us today, don't have any doubts of where we're headed, and make sure that they get their questions answered today. We have some experts with us that will be able to detail exactly our direction, our path forward on our comprehensive economic development strategy. You may be aware that each of the 7 economic development districts in the state has been asked to complete a 5-year comprehensive economic development strategy, and that includes ours. They're going to start that process in the fall of 2023. This is a requirement of the EDA so that we don't have a choice. This is something that we're required to complete. Again, we've talked about this in previous meetings, and I think that this is a perfect opportunity since we are live today to answer the rest of or any remaining questions or comments that we have. I want to make sure that everyone understands that there are going to be several, I don't know how exactly how many, but several outreach engagement efforts on this same time. We will talk about trying and to keep them straight so that we don't mix anybody up. In addition, it seems like quite a few work to complete the many SIDS, comprehensive economic development strategies at one time. And this allows our efforts to be synergized with one another as all 7 EDDs across the states work on this. You probably have met Dan with Camoin Strategies Consulting, I should say. He's the one that's taking the lead on this, and we'll take the opportunity now to turn the time over to Dan. And since we don't have, I guess, connection with online presentation, if you'll stay at your seat, that's probably the best way to present it. Dan, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. I'm going to defer to Laura Hanson first to provide an overview of the
Okay,
assignment.
sorry, we'll do it to Laura first.
No worries, Commissioner. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for making some time on your agenda for us to come visit with you today. As I want to just clarify that there are 2 separate processes that are happening that are very similar, but they're distinct at the same time. The first of which is developing the regional SEDS document, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that is just for the Wasatch Front Regional Council area. Every single AOG around the state will be developing something similar. They're all in the same timeline. In addition to that, we are developing a statewide strategy document. So some of you may be familiar with the Unified Transportation Planning process. Similar to developing a SEDS, each of the state's metropolitan planning organizations, of which Wasatch Front Regional Council is one, has to develop a document called the Regional Transportation Plan. So there are several of those around the state. Historically, they were all developed relatively independent of one another, kind of the way the SEDS are performed right now. A few years back, I think I can credit Andrew with this brainchild, or maybe a collaboration, a team, but we came up with a great idea of rolling all of those regional transportation plans up into a statewide unified transportation plan. It ended up being a tremendous tool for all of the regions of the state to communicate what their transportation vision is, what the transportation needs are for their area. It's a great communication tool to take to the legislature, where everyone's using the same terminology, the same costing structures, the same phasing, so that a legislator can pick up one plan and see exactly how it meets and matches up with that of another region. So we're trying to channel the same idea and do something similar with these SEDS documents. And we are working on a name for the document, which is a little bit of a mouthful, so bear with me here. The Governor's Office of Planning and Budget is partnering with the Office of Economic Opportunity on this. And we went back and forth on names, and we landed on Utah's Coordinated Action Plan for Economic Vision 2030. So I know Andrew's smirking. We have, the legislature created the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission last year, which is a really interesting body. It's chaired by the governor, has the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, various cabinet members, representatives from local governments and different organizations. They developed a document last year called Utah's Economic Vision 2030. We are nesting this within that process. It will be kind of the next step where we're really taking that high-level state vision and implementing it in the regions. And so this is kind of that bridge between the regional SEDS documents and the state's strategy. So we put out an RFP. We got several great proposals. We're really pleased by the proposal and the response we received from Camoin Associates, both Dan Gunderson here and Alex Tranmer.
from Camoin have been hired. We had a member of each EDD or AOG on that selection committee. Marcia participated in that process. We want this to feel like your plan as much as it is the GOPBs, GOEDs, or any other region. And we are here really not to present to you today, but instead to listen to you. The first step in any good planning process is talking to stakeholders and helping understand what your interests are. And so that's really the gist of our conversation here today. So we have a few questions we'd like to ask you all. But first, I'm going to let Dan give an introduction to Camoin and their experience, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Thank you, Laura. And good day, everybody. It's great to be here. We met with several of you in a kickoff meeting that was virtual. And we did some back and forth. We did some interactive polling. It was a fun get to know. This week, we are here to meet with each one of the 7 regions and to have an exploratory conversation on some basics. Let's just hit the fundamentals first. We're in a diagnostic phase of this assignment. We'll very quickly move to strategic development, and there'll be a workshop in September where we'll be back around probably this table, where we'll roll up the sleeves and really try to put the pieces together in this rather complex rubric or construct that the state has. But it's so so simple in its elegance, and yet it's complex. And very few states go in this direction. And I think this is where Utah is going to lead a lot of the other states. How coordinated is the state really in its economic development efforts? Or are they localized and fiercely independent? And if so, how are they performing? How, that's not where you want to be, but to coordinate, to leverage one another's efforts can bring out so much more. So we were very excited, extremely excited to be asked to be part of this process. Camoin Associates has been in business for about 23 years. It is a niche economic development group that started in rural upstate New York to focus on communities that may have been disengaged from the resources and from the expertise they needed to move along. Over the years, we've kept that focus on both rural, but also counties and regions, states, and even a U.S. territory. We've performed well over 1,400 projects in 45 states over the time period, doing everything from the, looking at the economic impact of a development parcel through strategic plans, organizational assessments, leadership development. And we also have a direct marketing arm where we reach investors throughout the world on behalf of economic development agencies and match investors with development opportunities. So we like to say we're the only full service economic development firm in the country. I believe that's true. None of my competitors have doubted that so far. But here to be in Utah is really truly a project that I believe can become a legacy project, not for our firm, but I think for other economic development groups around the country. So as Laura described, the state, the governor, the legislative leaders have a commission that will meet tomorrow. They will publicly release the economic part of the 2030 vision. And it has, let's say, a modest goal of having Utah be the #1, let me get this right, to create the strongest economy in the world. Now, when you're leading in the nation, as Utah has for many years, I guess the next place to go is the world. But to do that, they take it a step further and they say that there will be a coordinated and optimal growth strategy, moving away from jobs for the jobs purpose to what is optimal economic growth. So that is the strategy. It is incredibly rational, but actually trend setting in terms of where the nation is. But it requires, however, that all the pieces be aligned, right? And in this case, that means the economic strategies throughout the state. They reside in at least 7 different regions, right? In the form of EDDs, having comprehensive economic development strategies, SEDS. Of course, you all know that. Many of you are part of that process and part of the strategy. SEDS process being around since 1965 and being used for various different purposes. But then it gets a little complicated as several municipalities, localities, and maybe even regions may have their own takeaway strategies, or if not strategies, at least blueprints for action to move some of the same goals. So in doing the diagnostics here to make sure that Utah is coordinated in this approach, that what's happening in one region might benefit another. There could be a linkage of one or two or many, and that the state is supportive of what's happening in the regions. It's necessary for us to make sure that the SEDS are hitting the mark. And the timing could not be better in that all of the SEDS, as you know, have been adjusted to be essentially on the same time frame, so that in 2023, there'll be new SEDS that will be developed for the next 5 years. Each year, they're supposed to be reviewed, tweaked, and reports submitted. But here's the not so dirty secret about SEDS nationwide. Okay, let's talk about the reality of it, and that'll lead to my first question. The dirty reality, and I know this is a public meeting, so I hope I don't get quoted and remarks somehow making its way back to the EDA, but not all SEDS are alike, meaning they're not of the same quality or sophistication. Nobody will disagree with that, right? But even within regions, some will check the box to check the box. We go through the process. Have we done it? Have we done it correctly? Yes. Other regions will look at it as a phenomenal opportunity to develop a strategy that many different entities can be supportive of and get behind, and that truly represents what's happening in that region and where it needs to go. Your strategy is hitting that mark. It's getting very close to that mark and will exceed that mark, I believe, in the next round when some of these ties are made throughout the state and a larger framework established. So my first question really is, I'd like to have an honest conversation, those of you online and in this room, just about how the SEDS has been used. Is it something, and now I'm going to go, I won't go around the room and ask you all to repeat verbatim chapter and verse what's in it. But in general, is this SEDS a strategy that is inclusive of the economic development goals and efforts of the region? Meaning, are other entities looking to it and saying, I see where I fit, I know where I'm contributing, or not? Now, there are 4 major goals. For me to repeat these to you is a little audacious, but I'll do it just so that we're all reminded. First, link development with transportation and other infrastructure. Clearly, a lot of activity in that realm. 2, create fiscally sustainable places. 3, provide amenities And by amenities, you mean the attracting skilled labor that can find a community with walkable assets nearby and preservation of open space, et cetera. And then fourth, to attract, retain businesses and encourage innovation. The fourth being the most traditional, if you will, of economic development, professional objectives. Today's economic development is all four of these. Over the last decade, economic development has become much more, it's accepted that it's a lot more than just about big game hunting or helping businesses expand, with the realization that they can't do that if the other pieces are not in place. So we're coming off a 4-year, 5-year strategy now. And I'd like to ask how that strategy relates to what's going on today, keeping in mind that in the midst of that, the world changed dramatically. So is this SEDS, are you finding that this SEDS has been useful? Did it help guide the region through the most disruptive event that we have known in our lifetimes? And what does it portend for moving forward? That's my question. So I just want to open it up. Anybody who might want to comment on that, please do.
Questions or comments? Dan, I'm going to bring up one. It has to, and as a member of the Economic Opportunity Commission, I think we look forward to the results. My question deals as we look at the 7 economic development districts, obviously across the state, we have a wide variety of rural, urban, and attraction of businesses into those districts. Just coming from a regional concept that we were able to put together a couple of years ago between Weber County and Davis County. And it's worked, the collaboration has been very good. I'm assuming that we're looking for collaborations not only among counties, but within these regions and outside the region so that we can agree on a common path forward. My question is how do we get certain, and I'm not going to point out any cities, but when we started the regional concept, we had some of our major players within the cities, within the counties, that really took a negative approach because they felt that the region was stepping on their toes and would take business or take business opportunities away from their particular city. So I see this from an economic opportunity commission standpoint. How do we get those cities, or even in this case, counties, to agree that boundaries don't matter that much when we concentrate on our districts or our regions? We should be concerned about that region, not about trying to keep our neighbor from obtaining that business. Does that ring a bell with you?
Oh, it rings a bell, doesn't crack the bell, rings a bell, I get it. And I think that's why the state has hired us as consultants to be a partner in this process, objective, but to bring different perspectives to the table. So the scope of our project has the phase that we're in now, which is a regional and statewide diagnostic process. What's happening within the regions and within the municipalities within that region, using the SEDS as the first point of reference, but then looking and just as good diagnostics, what's healthy, what's unhealthy within each one of these, and what might have to happen to be healthier from an economic development perspective. So we're in this diagnostics, and then we'll move into strategic priorities where we are able, as a result of the diagnostics, to be able to pinpoint the weaknesses that may need to be mitigated. Some of those will be organizational. Some of those will be leadership based. Some of those may be cultural. You know, there'll be plenty. So how do you do this? What we proposed to Laura and the team that reviewed the different consultant approach proposals was that the conversation should really begin with what does it take to achieve economic prosperity, regardless of what community you're coming from. Remove the politics, remove the competitive perspectives or opinions, remove that. Let's look at the fundamentals. Is there good infrastructure? What is the state of innovation? What does the intellectual capital, the human capital, what does it look like? Is the place a place that is attracting visitors and that people want to live in and stay in? Is the place engaged globally, internationally with trade and investment? And speaking of investment, how is the private investment world, the commercial lenders, the other sources of funding that can be brought to bear? But looking at the fundamentals, and our diagnostics will be taking each regional SEDS and comparing it against those areas. And what we'll find is that some areas will hit the mark in maybe 2 or 6 of the measures, and therefore maybe the focus is going to have to be more on the other 4. Other regions may hit all of the measures, perhaps. In that case, it's how do you optimize? Where does it lead you then? And is the state understanding, supportive of the direction you're going? So I think that's how I would answer that question. There will be another phase to this project, and all this is happening essentially between now and the end of the year. There'll be another stage to this process after we've come to agreement with what the strategies are and whether they're in synergy with the states, is to look at organizational dynamics. What then does that mean? How do you get it done? Does that help?
That does, no?
Thank you.
Well, I just say good luck. Yeah, I think you've taken a task that definitely needs to be done, but it's not the easiest one in the world. Laura, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we go into questions?
No, I see Andrew's got a question, but yeah, really, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah,
You know,
That's
yeah.
what this is about. I think we want to make sure that everybody's clear on what this is about and the direction going forward. Andrew?
Thanks. Dan, you asked, I know you're going to have a series of questions for us.
Yes.
And thank you. And the first one of them, do me a favor, say it one more time so we can still be on track.
Okay. Has the SEDS been used as a reference document or as an operational vehicle for economic development purposes? How has it been used?
Okay.
And what has been achieved as a result of the region having a SEDS?
Okay, thank you. So to that question, my answer to that, so we all have different perspectives on this. I can, if it's okay for me to speak like sort of as WFRC, and then what you think as a county official or what Shannon or, or Holland thinks as a private company, whatever, everybody has different perspectives. For WFRC, my answer to that is sort of. Hopefully Marcia's okay with my saying that. My answer is it's sort of helpful, and here's what I mean. So I put on the screen, shared on the screen, the 4 key strategies in the SEDS that you read off.
Yes.
Okay, and that first one, linking development with transportation and other infrastructure. That strategy, that coordination underlies like everything we do at WFRC, right, Ted? Thinking about the location, where development occurs really matters. It underlies everything we do. And so we look at this through a policy lens and how do we shape policy to not be siloed. And actually I was back and forth with Laura and shared some info with you guys last session. There was a bill, House Bill 35, and the folks from GOEO are well aware of this. They drive this, but on tax incentives that the state gives out for business creation. And for the first time, the law now says that when tax credits are given for a business that creates jobs, there should be consideration given in terms of the amount of that tax credit to the location of where those jobs are created and how much additional infrastructure is needed to support those jobs. Is it just, as you said, a job, any job, wherever, or are those jobs coordinated, Paul, with the transit system. So it's taking advantage of existing infrastructure. So that kind of coordination, that philosophy underlies everything that we do. So that's strategy number one in the SEDS. So is it helpful for us? Absolutely. It drives so much of what we do. Do we do it because it's in the SEDS? Like, do we say our SEDS says we should do this, therefore? I mean, probably not as much as we should, maybe. But I guess I'm just trying to come at your question, like trying to identify what the strategies are, and do we employ these all day long? Do we wave the SEDS around as a document and say, this is, here it's in the SEDS? Probably not as much. I don't know if that matters, Laura, as you're thinking about statewide, but I'm just trying to answer your question. So
Andrew, can I give another example to that maybe? So one of your questions within the question was, was our SEDS a guiding document for us in the face of COVID, right? Our SEDS was relevant in the face of COVID because we realized we needed to update the SEDS to be a better tool in response to resiliency related concern like that. And so we're utilizing EDA CARES funds to do so as we speak. So it was relevant. It wasn't prepared for the pandemic, but we're trying to now make sure it's updated in that way. And then if I can also call an audible here, this committee got an injection of new membership in the last year.
Yeah.
So many of you may be thinking, well, I don't know if you've been using the SEDS, have you? Maybe if you're feeling like you have a comment about how you'd like to see the SEDS used, go ahead and make it, even if you don't know if we've been doing that or not, okay? Just to make sure everyone, it's okay if you don't know what we've been doing for the last 5 years.
Let me also follow up by saying that hopefully the EDA isn't listening as well. Unfortunately, they are still on a very old structure. And so as EDA CARES money came through, we were very lucky, if you will, that we had some innovative things in the SEDS, like helping out Salt Lake Community College with some of their asks, and Visit Ogden with some of their asks. And so, unfortunately, we have a document that has to be built because of that. And I do think 5 years later, and looking forward to our next reiteration of whatever this is going to look like, it's going to look totally different. It will be a much, you used the great word, economic prosperity, I think is where you, and so I think we'll look at it from through a lens like that. And to follow up with what Megan said, a lot of these individuals are new, including myself, to the SEDS process, and a lot with very great business acumen in their minds. And so I think it'll be really fun to see how we mold and shape the next SEDS. Still trying to figure out how to fit into that constraint of what EDA has or wants from us. So from our 5-year SEDS, not from the statewide SEDS, but.
Anyone else?
Meg, I'm going to take your invitation as one of the new people to the group. So, as the health system representation in the room, I can't not mention health resiliency, right? So the last few years has illustrated this point in a way that, has never been illustrated before, the link between economic resilience and the health of communities, the public health. And interestingly, I think maybe part of the how, right? So how does a plan like this address health is somewhat captured in bullet 1 up there already. But I would just offer that maybe thinking about those things in the light of health and the social determinants of health is a way to think about economic resilience.
I agree. And from an economic developer's point of view, the pandemic opened up all kinds of opportunities and eyes to what's happening in the med tech industry. We're doing a med tech assessment for Michigan. What did the pandemic do? What are some of those new industries? Phenomenal across the life science spectrum that people would not have probably pursued otherwise, or maybe it advanced it 5 years at least. I'm also, as we're taking on this assignment, I'm helping the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, assess all their health systems and hospitals. How did they respond to COVID? What was right? What went wrong? What should they be doing in the future? So I'm getting deep into your world, and but understanding that health from both an economic point of view, but also from a social, personal, lifestyle, it has to be part of this economic development conversation. Yeah, and so maybe I can keep moving it along.
Go ahead.
Okay, it plays off of the question about COVID, naturally. The next question would be, in this, I'd like to say post-COVID world. Let's all hope that that's true. I don't know. But at any rate, what are the core economic challenges that are facing the region right now? What do you anticipate the SEDS is going to have to deal with, or what are you dealing with right now that you may not have been anticipating a few years back? What's come front and center for you?
Sure, we've got some ideas on that.
I don't mean to be the only one talking, but I'll share again. We, during the pandemic, experienced tremendous staffing shortages, and that problem persists for us. I don't know all the root causes of the problem. The folks in this room probably know it better than I do, but one thing that we're hearing really loud and clear from our hospitals across the state is, housing and some of these ancillary, not ancillary, I mean, core components of how people live are huge barriers. I mean, across the spectrum of employees, right, from MAs to medical assistants to physicians, people have a really hard time affording to live near where they work. So that's really front of mind for us right now.
Yeah. Additional, Ed, go ahead.
Thank you. We saw a huge, okay, let me try to start over. When the pandemic numbers started rolling through, we were able to quantify the stuff that we've already seen qualifiably within the minority communities. So these conversations and this conversation so far has been very clear in, we have these 7 different districts within the state. How do we rectify the differences between rural and urban centers? But we always seem to, at least initially, forget that we have a 17% Hispanic population across all of these districts. We have 22% minority population across all of these districts that always are the afterthought, which is why we're here, right? That's welcome to the Swazo Business Center. And that's why we exist in these types of conversations. So we can bring up these things. So they're talked about at the onset of these conversations, not a month or 2 or 3 iterations later. The pandemic showed this very clearly. 70% of the population is Hispanic. At one point, 40% of the COVID cases were Hispanic. When the world kind of shut down in March and April of 2020, just in Salt Lake City alone, Salt Lake County alone, we saw East Side businesses, oh, we just get a break now and we're going to get government funds. And we saw West Side businesses shut down or not stop working. That was really one of the major determinants, and Nick's team can attest to this, right? The Hispanic population couldn't stop working. They didn't have the other safety nets in place to where they can just take time off like other folks could have done. So we need to be very clear when we articulate what these plans are, that we're not looking at just urban versus rural, not versus urban and rural. We're looking at the other demographics that are in play as well.
Good, thank you. Ted, do you have a question or comment?
I was just noting a comment that was shared on the chat from Mayor Wynn from Tooele City, which has, I think, maybe builds off of your good comment, which is that this region is not homogeneous. There's rural areas and there's urban areas and suburban areas. And if we can attend to the distinct issues and needs in those different areas. And Mayor Wynn, I hope that that was a good paraphrasing.
And just quickly from the private side and the construction industry, the way we've seen the pandemic affect the supply chain between how we can get workforce being one of our supply chains, but also roof trusses and concrete and all the things, because the market is really hot right now. I mean, our real estate in Utah is amazing, but we can't continue to back up, and we're having to say no to clients that are really wanting to build here at this point. And I think that's part of some of the things we've seen from the pandemic, is that we can't get the supplies here in time or the workforce here in time as well.
And I know online, we've got Anisa Brown and Shailene Gee have raised their hands, and then also Shannon has a comment. So
Let's go with Shannon, then we'll go with, you can tell me who's online.
okay.
Yeah, just to match some of the comments that have been made about the labor market and workforce here in Utah, it's a significant struggle for Rio Tinto at this specific site. So Rio Tinto is a very global corporation, and there's employees from all over the world who want to live and work in Utah at this site at Kennecott. That being said, we're still at least 200 employees short this year in our labor projections, and that means that we produce less copper. So there's a significant business impact there because the labor market's so competitive. Additionally, one of the issues that we're facing more and more as a very natural resource intensive organization is that as growth moves towards the west in the Salt Lake Valley, that means that there's more interaction between residents and citizens and the mine, which is a very, very heavy industrial operation. And I think as we see growth expand and explode as we have, we'll see more heavy industry experience more and more nuisance complaints, which puts their operations at risk. And that will continue to happen at Rio Tinto.
Susie, do you have a question for?
I'm sorry, is that okay, Mr. Chair? Because Anisa and Shailene had their hands raised.
they?
Can we
Okay,
go to
Who
them?
do we have?
Anisa
Brown.
Anisa Brown, if you want to go ahead.
Go ahead.
And then
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, my voice is kind of going because I'm in DC for a presentation. So just want to chime in with what we're seeing with Catalyst Campus expanding into Ogden and the impacts that we've identified at Hill Air Force Base over the years. Some of the things that we're being impacted with was short-term housing, not having the potential for short-term housing in downtown Ogden or anywhere that has a sense of community, because that's what keeps people here. So we've been hosting events, we've been doing different things with Women Tech Council, Tech Mom, as many people as we can in our community to bring that sense of community and bring it to the aerospace and defense industry, but that's still needed. And then retaining our talent, bringing companies here. We have 200 people moving out to downtown Ogden to support Air Force projects coming up in the next year. So retaining the talent that we have, like Northrop Grumman bringing in 6,000 personnel, ensuring that they stay here. And if they're not happy at Northrop, they go somewhere else local. So giving them opportunities to continue within that aerospace realm. Then economic resiliency, we've done a really good job with economic resiliency, but ensuring that we're laying the infrastructure to build out to support 200 people coming to Ogden, to just support housing opportunities. And then lastly, emphasizing on the base and what is critical to their needs, because that literally feeds into our community, having one of the largest civilian community in the Air Force at a base. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, I know Shailene
Shailene.
Gee, and then also Rick and Susie.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure my mic's off. I just wanted to underscore some of the things that have been said about the post-pandemic things that we've noticed. I think for us as a community-based financial institution, the links between economic health, community health, and individual health have never been more clear. And so as we think about all of the things that we do in terms of financing, investment, service, we're very aware of that. We also know, thinking about that question about regional and boundaries within the regional, we would rely on the plans that are put into place by all of you and also the SEDS to think about where we're making all those investments, where we need to think about lending and where we need to think about service. But we also know that there are real differences across zip codes, across neighborhoods, and across other kinds of boundary definitions within the region that have to be included. Just to underscore what the mayor said and also what colleague from Swazo said. So we're looking very broadly at what constitutes an inclusive economy. That is the top priority for us. And it crosses all these different things that people have pointed out, but we would rely on a lot of the work that this group is doing to let us know as a financial institution what we need to do across those different business units that we have in the community.
Great, thank you. Rick, do you have a question or comment?
Just a comment, kind of a follow-up with Nick and some of the others. Obviously, dealing with workforce training with Solid Community College. And of course, President Brush is, he's on the line as well. The situation we're in right now, it's all across the industry sectors. We've already heard from 3 or 4 different industry sectors saying anywhere from 200 to several hundred individuals are needed for their particular companies. Well, coming down a project with the University of Utah Healthcare with building that health sciences center or hospital on the west side, West Valley Magna area, the planning is already in stages to make sure that we are tapping individuals that live in that community for a wide variety of ONET codes, of job codes, so they can fill those job codes and be trained up and work in their community so that not only is it a wonderful service to the community, the service is being provided by community members. And I think that's a model that I think it'll be a wonderful model to get going and launch it and make it work. But at the same time, we have a lot of underrepresented and underemployed demographics in our community that are going to have to travel to get education, training, and ultimately work. And so, you know, when you had the one document up, the first bullet point was making sure that we coordinated within an area or a region. It's not always going to be possible, but I think the efforts can be made. And, you know, depending upon the project, if we can tap into the local community with a willful, intended effort, we're going to have a better likelihood of a positive outcome.
Great comment. Susie, then I'll go to Sarah.
Okay, just really quick, 3 comments, insights I don't think have been made yet. First, you mentioned the supply chain, and we have just noticed that is increasing costs considerably and interest rates going up. We've seen several projects moving out of the feasibility range. You might see this like in fiber, the take rate would have to be so high in a new community. And so it does affect economic infrastructure. Second comment, we mentioned staff shortages, but we've also found that there are some advantages in hiring for remote work, and that some of our rural communities are finding that it's giving them some opportunities through more remote work and people wanting to work from these rural communities because they're seen as less restrictive during times of COVID or during a pandemic. So we've seen some advantages to some areas compared to disadvantage to others. And then the third one is just that it's a fast pace. You have, with all of these Zoom team meetings, you have 5-6 meetings in a day. And we just noticed projects are rolling through at breakneck speed. And I don't know what this means on the road a bit, but it certainly has some economic implications. It's a faster pace. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
So just to quickly add a couple more comments from the visitor economy perspective, knowing that is included in the SEDS document. And it's interesting to look at the various elements because obviously the pandemic led each of our communities to understand the importance of the visitor economy on our overall economic standing. And then as people were able to move around a little bit again, our, abundance of outdoor recreation opportunities led themselves to an over influx of participation in a lot of those activities in some of our communities, while others struggled to bring, meetings and conventions and business travel back to continue that impact. But as we look to remote work or opportunities for workforce recruitment to fill all of these jobs we're trying to create, we know that that outdoor recreation component is a really important element in the recruitment effort. And so we've got to consider that as part of this economic development strategy so that we make sure our access, our maintenance, our availability, and taking care and working with our public sector partners to ensure that maintains and we can keep that quality of life element while we increase the numbers and usage is just a really important component, as is the impact of short-term rentals on workforce housing and housing availability throughout, and recognizing that it's a really integral piece of the visitor economy puzzle, but it also is an important part of this housing crisis we're in. So looking at those two factors.
Mayor Berube, I believe you had a comment, if you're still with us.
I am, Commissioner, I sent my comments in through chat, but I think some obstacles to growth are what I call soft infrastructure. Being government's primary purpose is to provide safety to its citizens. It's getting more and more difficult to recruit police officers. Crime seems to be continuing to rise, and the legislature continues to put additional burdens on policing. So I think soft infrastructure, which I classify keeping up with schools, policing, etc., along with water, are some obstacles to growth.
Thank you for that. And anybody else before we move on? Dan, I would just say you talked about obstacles. I think from my viewpoint, economic development for a lot of people in today's world is not necessarily a nice word because economic development converts to growth. And we do have some areas in the state, believe it or not, that look at growth as being bad and actually campaign on the basis of we're going to stop growth. We know that Utah saw a 20% growth rate over the past year. I don't see that it's logical or even viable to stop growth. But as you work with these regions in certain areas, you're going to have an obstacle because when you talk about jobs, you talk about infrastructure, they relate that to people coming in from California and driving up housing prices, taking over apartments. So that's an obstacle. And there are, I would hope, a minority out there that view it, but economic development for a lot of people is negative, takes up space, takes up housing, and brings more people in their neighborhood that they don't want to see because it takes away that piece of farm ground that now turns into homes or apartments. So I think that's reality that a lot of us in politics are seeing today. And you're going to see that when you start talking in some of these areas.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, we have two more questions and we can make them quick. Although this next one is kind of bounces off what Andrew had raised earlier. And that is this being the most well-resourced and prosperous of all the regions in the state. Do you see any natural connections or advantages to working with other AOGs in helping to develop them or even yourselves when in partnership? Do you see any linkages?
That's probably an Andrew question to start with.
Well, yes, but I don't want to prejudice to the discussion here. And you're saying work with the other AOGs and maybe even more broadly, our region work with other regions of the state interconnected. So yes, but let's see what other people think about that.
Comments?
I'll comment here. I've worked all over rural Utah and I live in a different AOG, and I think it makes a lot of sense, just very intuitively, for WFRC and MAG to be interwoven partners in many cases. I think it's harder to see the connection between other AOGs and those two AOGs. I think that those other AOGs want many of the resources and opportunities that the Wasatch Front has. They're not sure I imagine that they're not sure how to pull that into their communities because it's such a gradual process. The Wasatch Front developed over many decades in a different way and at a different pace in many of these rural communities. And so they're just at a different place in the timeline, in my opinion, and it's harder to full scale launch the same resources in rural areas that urban areas can already accommodate. Doesn't mean we can't be partners, but there are distinct issues. There's a lot of Airbnbs in rural Utah that there just isn't the same demand in urban Utah necessarily. So that's just one point. But yeah, it's a very different animal. It doesn't mean we can't be partners, but the solutions, in my opinion, aren't typically the same.
Good point. Anyone else? Viewpoints?
I mean, I'm happy to just make a brief comment about that. I'm thinking of Commissioner or the mayor coming from Morgan County or Chris Sloan coming out of Tooele County. And we have to think about the difference. I mean, Shannon's point and your point about being well-resourced on the Wasatch Front is not always the same case for Tooele and Morgan counties, who are part of the WFRC area. So let's keep in mind that we can't just say WFRC. Really, I think when we think about this, Laura, we've talked about this lots of times, right? That there's a sort of Wasatch Front, and then there's a Wasatch Back or Tooele Valley or other rural areas of the state. But particularly for those counties, Tooele and Morgan, Summit County is similar. The economies and the travel patterns are so tied together that we have to be, we couldn't do our work and just think about the Wasatch Front. We have to think about those travel sheds. And then the opportunity, I mean, Shannon, you were talking about the interface between where people live and then the mine. You know, is there more of an opportunity for there to be particularly industrial or manufacturing jobs located off the Wasatch Front where there hasn't been as much job creation? And then with telecommuting, can we have a better tie between Wasatch Front and the other areas of the state? So I just think we need to be taking as much advantage as we can about where the needs for jobs are, where the land is, what the impacts would be associated with different types of industry, and then the ability to link urban to rural with what the pandemic has shown us is more feasible with telecommuting. So, I mean, for a million reasons, I think the answer is yes, we all have to be working together.
I'd agree. Anyone else? Ted?
Mr. Chair, I'll just quickly note the analog of the unified plan. Utah's unified plan brings together entities across the state with very different kinds of needs relative to transportation, but there's just this beauty in coming together and singing as a choir, identifying a few shared strategies and goals, and really elevating the dialogue so that it's much more visible. And I guess it's implied by having a statewide SEDS, but I just wanted to make that general comment that there is a whole bunch of value of us working together.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Dan.
Okay, and finally a softball. How can the state support your economic development goals?
Who wants to take that? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I think one of the things that, as Andrew was saying, we're different than the Wasatch Front. Now, how can you support us? Make the laws maybe, or help with the laws to where we can have a bigger share of some of that money that we come down to the other side to use and utilize. I mean, we can't put in a Costco in Morgan County. We're not going to put in a Sam's Club or even a Walmart in Morgan County. There's just not enough land unless we build clear on top of the mountain. So now, how can you help us? I mean, that pool of economic growth that comes from sales tax on the Wasatch Front or any of the other big development areas, more of that money could come to smaller rural communities to help us build maybe a different type of economic development. such as what we're trying to do in Morgan County, which is more tourism, having people come from other areas, visit us. But as far as us participating in manufacturing or any of those kinds of things, I don't see that. I see us more as a tourism destination, and we're trying not to become large residential also. So that it's a balance that we're trying to work on. We've got a lot of assets in Morgan County, but that's where I think we need more assistance, is in helping to develop those areas. And I don't, that's what we're working on right now.
Good to hear. Anyone else? Go ahead, Susie.
I actually have to leave, but the meeting I'm leaving to go to is the Point of the Mountain. And I was going to say, we talked about the unique areas, probably that.
Yep. Yeah, you put that mic.
I turned it on. I just think the Point of the Mountain is obviously an incredible opportunity. And we have several things about Utah that are very unique. And you mentioned the worldwide and international, and look at the languages and how well people speak those here. So I would hope you would just help us by recognizing what's unique about Utah. We have the youngest age, the largest household sizes in the nation. And I just had a thought come to me during this meeting, which I've never said in an economic development meeting before, but it's one, and we've done a lot of economic development plans, but it's one I feel strongly about. As I think about it, I think our children are an incredible asset, and they've had a rough 2 years. And I think if we have the greatest educational, recreational, cultural, that they are an incredible asset of Utah, and they are the future. And I think that is also something that could be reflected, and you can help us with in this plan. I mean, health-wise, you certainly do things with them as well. So just something I wanted to throw out, and I'm sorry I have to leave, but this has been interesting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online?
I've got one more comment.
Go ahead.
Sorry. And I apologize for speaking on behalf of rural communities. Please correct me. But in my experience, many of the rural communities in the state that I've worked with have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 part-time employees. And every year the legislature comes out with new laws for accessory dwelling units, for Airbnbs, for water. And those tiny towns are catching up on these laws that they're really unprepared for. They don't know how to implement and enforce. Sometimes they're really confusing to interpret. And it's very much one size fits all. And when you have a couple of part-time employees, you're just playing catch up, and you have no opportunity to be proactive about economic development. You just have to be reactive given the nature of your situation. And so any simplification or one size doesn't fit all attitude at the legislature, I think, would largely benefit rural communities, especially who take kind of an outside share of economic struggles in the state.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Laura?
I could just respond to Councilmember Ellsworth's comment just now. We hear you loud and clear. Cameron's hair is on fire somewhere, and he doesn't know why. And he wants me to say that one size misfits all. We understand that. We're really looking forward. I think having this planning component in the governor's office really elevates that conversation for the first time in a long time. I think we're really lucky and fortunate, and had great support from our legislative partners this last session in getting $1.65 million allocated for technical assistance for local governments to meet just those types of issues. And so we hear you, and we're going to keep working on it. But I think that's a great point, is to emphasize this in this planning document, that one size does not fit all. And many of our local governments really need some assistance. So it's great. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Anyone else? Commissioner?
I would like to just say.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Hold on one second. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Go ahead if he wants to first.
Go ahead, Commissioner Backrell.
Okay. One more item within that is the match money. That the small rural areas do not have the match, or they don't have enough. I mean, luckily we've been able to get a little bit, but when it comes to like to put in a trail or put in outdoor rec, it's a 50% match. We can't do it. So that's where it can become a problem. We can put in a match of some sort if it's in kind, because we've already got employees that are working. But if we can have a little bit less of a match that we have to meet, it would be nice.
Great, thank you. Chris, you have a question or comment?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I'm driving, so I'm trying not to be much of a menace as far as pushing buttons. One other component that's been mentioned a couple of times from a rural perspective, and we're kind of much like Morgan, trying to figure out how to maintain our own identity, and yet with a realization that we are in fact a bedroom community. He touched on sales tax increment not being able to be achieved in Morgan. We're kind of in a similar point here. We send 70% of our workforce to the Salt Lake Valley. And you know, I see all these wonderful transportation plans and things like that that we'd like to do. We simply don't have the ability to do them here, and we need them desperately. We've got a choke point on I-80 that we've talked about, but I'm speaking specifically of transit and some of the great things I see in transit-oriented development, the potential that lies there. We can't do because we don't have the transit capacity, despite the fact that we send all that workforce to Salt Lake or to the Wasatch Front. We don't have the financial ability to expand our transit capability here. We don't have the tax, we don't contribute the tax increment to UTA, for example, that would be required to bump up our transit out here and allow more people to take advantage of us. So we're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place. We don't have enough people using transit to just justify more transit. We can't get people to use it because it isn't flexible enough to meet the needs of our 70% of the workforce that heads to the Wasatch Front. So when we talk about roads and we talk about transportation, for us, expanding our ability to economically develop is also going to be tied to a transit system that we can't really participate in.
Thanks for that, Chris. Any last comments, Dan? Did that answer your questions?
It does. Can I make one comment? Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead. Who is this?
This is the mayor from Morgan City.
Oh, go ahead.
Just let me give you an example of a bridge that we've been talking about on what we call Front Street that would reconnect the two sides of the city. So we have that in progress, and the original bid was 2.5 million, and now it's up to 5.5 million starting next year. So when you get a city and a county that has not a dense population, it does throw a twist on those kinds of questions that we need it, but how can we get it? And the other thing besides that on transportation is many of us feel blessed to be on the east side of the Wasatch Front. The air's clean, the water's wonderful, but yet it just seems like you can get sort of left out when we're talking about some of these big projects and some of these other alternatives. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody that's defending us that are small. And we're not really that unhappy, other than it's just impossible because the cost of a road or a bridge is the same in rural Utah as it is anywhere else in the state, but the funds are just impossible for a small community to come up with. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for the comment. Dan, back to you.
Well, I just want to thank you for inviting us to your table today. And we're looking forward to working with you very closely, and particularly coming back here and participating in a workshop in September. I know I speak for my colleague, Alex Kramer, that we're just truly excited to be a part of this process. And please know, you can call us, reach out to us. Alex is the project manager. She's responsible for all the details, and you'll find her to be very accessible, and myself as well.
Great.
Laura, anything
Thank
else you
you.
want to say?
Laura, anything else?
Yeah, I just echo my thanks as well. We really appreciate all the great feedback. This is just the beginning of the conversation. We look forward to working really closely with you all. There will be 3 actually in-person visits from Caboyne throughout this planning process. The next one in September, second week of September. And we hope to be able to really present some ideas to you and get your feedback on those, use you as a sounding board at that time. So thanks. Call me anytime. And we really appreciate your feedback.
Thanks, Laura. Dan, appreciate the discussion this afternoon. And let me just say that as a member of the Economic Opportunity Commission, what we saw come out as the work product of that committee last year was very worthwhile. We actually, we went into that, and I've been on a few committees through my years at the legislature. There's more talk than action. This particular committee, there's more action than talk. So I'm excited to see that final product. And I think we saw today with the discussion, obviously we have to address the urban, rural, Wasatch Front versus other areas. And we have to try to bring a strategy together that I'm not going to say equalizes, but more fully informs those rural areas and how we can cooperate together, balancing the growth issues with the issues that you have in rural county, which is more growth. So I see some optimistic, some real success coming out of the Economic Opportunity Committee because of the work that you're going to bring forward. So I hope to see that. Commissioner Fackrell, one last quick word.
One last quick thing. It would be nice as you're going through this plan to maybe reach out to us if you have a question instead of waiting for us to call you, because we may not know the question.
That's a great comment.
Thanks
Thank you so
again.
much.
And great discussion. Appreciate everybody that gave their viewpoints. I'm sure Dan can take that, Alex, and move forward with their discussion and their paperwork. Okay, let's now go to the next discussion item, which was the annual SIDS, which is our WFRC. We're going to turn that over to Marcia White.
Yeah, just real brief. I'll be real brief. We have a draft of the resilience plan, and so that will be coming to you shortly after we get through that. I know I think Commissioner, you made a couple of comments and had a conversation with the consultants, and then Davis County as well. And so we're working through the plan right now. And then the checkbox that we have to do with the EDA, but we'll have the annual report out. It's due end of September, I think. I'm somewhere, maybe the beginning of September. So we will have that. We're working on that as well. But both of those documents will be out to you. And then I made a wrong notation for the chair, but we will be starting our 5-year SEDS plan in September. So the 2022, not 2023. So
Wait, okay.
it needs to be
Yeah.
done by 2023.
I wondered about 2023.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
All right. Okay, thanks. Is that it, Marcia?
Yep.
Okay, any other business that we need to bring forward? Anybody have points they want to bring forward at this time?
And cancel our meeting.
Seeing none, our next meeting will be held for this committee on September 21, 2022. I believe that's right, at 1:30. Is that correct? September 21st at 1:30. The June 15th, 2022 meeting has been canceled. We actually, because this was live, we made this that quarterly meeting. So you can avoid that meeting in June. So just be aware of that. And there will be, as Marcia said, some discussion coming out between now and then on that 5-year plan. So look for some, I'm assuming Zoom or possibly in live meetings as we get together and discuss how we move that SIDS 5-year plan forward.
And depending on when you all might be able to come back out here again, we may adjust that September timeframe as well. So
Great.
Looks like we kind of are matching up to your timeframe. So.
Okay, thanks again. I don't see any other questions or hand raised on those online. Let me thank those members of the committee that are with us again this afternoon. I think it was very worthwhile. We welcomed our guests from Camcoin that I look forward to that final product. Thanks for everybody that taking their time out. Hopefully this is worthwhile. I think that we definitely saw some good business take place today. With that, I'd look for a final motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. See you in September, if not before, with an ad hoc.